Tokyo, May 15th, 1941. In the luxurious office of the German embassy, two men lean over a map of Eastern Europe. One of them is Germany's ambassador Eugen Ott, confidentially explaining to his friend the details of a top-secret operation. The other is his close friend, German journalist Dr. Richard Sorge, listening intently to every word. What Sorge is about to hear will change the course of World War II, but there's one problem. Ott doesn't know that his best friend has been working for Soviet intelligence for 8 years. "Richard, what I'm about to tell you must not leave this room," Ott says seriously, pointing to the map. "On June 22nd, our troops will begin Operation Barbarossa. We will strike along the entire Soviet border." Sorge nods with the demeanor of someone being trusted with his state secret. Outwardly calm, inside his world is turning upside down. He has just learned the exact date of Germany's attack on the Soviet Union. The information he has risked his life for 8 years to obtain is finally in his hands. But how did a German journalist become a Soviet superagent? And how did he manage to deceive some of the world's best intelligence officers for so long? The story began in 1933, when 38-year-old Dr. Richard Sorge received from Moscow a mission that seemed impossible: penetrate Japan and create an intelligence network there. Japan was one of the most closed countries in the world, where every foreigner was under constant surveillance by the secret police. One wrong step meant the end. But Sorge had an ace that made him the perfect candidate for this mission. Born to a German engineer, he spoke fluent German and could easily pass for a German citizen. Most importantly, he had letters of recommendation from influential Nazi functionaries, which he had obtained while working in China. Arriving in Tokyo in September 1933, Sorge began the most dangerous game of his life. By day, he was a German journalist, writing articles for Berlin newspapers and attending receptions at the German embassy. By night, he transformed into a Soviet resident, transmitting secret information to Moscow through a clandestine radio station. The key to success was meeting Lieutenant Colonel Eugen Ott, Germany's military attaché. Ott was a professional soldier but quite naive in politics. Sorge presented himself as an expert on Far Eastern politics and an ardent supporter of National Socialism. "Herr Sorge, your analytical abilities are simply astounding," Ott would say after their discussions. "You understand the Japanese mentality better than many of our diplomats." Sorge would smile and modestly reply, "I simply try to serve the Reich's interests, Herr Lieutenant Colonel." What Ott didn't know was that serving the Reich's interests, for Sorge, meant obtaining the maximum amount of German secrets to transmit to Moscow. Every confidential conversation, every document shown, every casually dropped phrase was carefully recorded and sent to Soviet intelligence. But Sorge understood that friendship with one German diplomat wasn't enough. He needed information from inside the Japanese government, and here, luck smiled on him. In one of Tokyo's restaurants, he met an old acquaintance from Shanghai. Hatsumi Ozaki was a brilliant Japanese journalist, an expert on Chinese affairs who had connections in the highest circles of the Japanese government. But most importantly, he secretly sympathized with communism and dreamed of world revolution. "Ozaki-san, what a pleasure to meet you in Tokyo," Sorge exclaimed upon their meeting, carefully hiding his excitement. He had just found the key to Japanese secrets. Over months of careful conversations, Sorge managed to recruit Ozaki without saying a word about Soviet intelligence. He presented it as gathering information for the international communist movement. Ozaki, driven by idealistic motives, agreed to help. "What have you heard about our government's plans regarding the USSR?" Sorge would carefully inquire during their meetings in cozy Tokyo restaurants. "For now, our generals are more interested in the southern direction," Ozaki would reply, understanding the true meaning of the question. "They believe that the oil of the Dutch East Indies is more important than Siberian forests. This information was priceless. Moscow desperately needed data on Japanese plans, as the prospect of a two-front war was Stalin's nightmare. Years passed, and Sorge's position became increasingly solid. In 1938, Ott became Germany's ambassador to Japan, and Sorge effectively became his unofficial advisor. He regularly visited the ambassador's home, knew his family, participated in all important meetings. German diplomats trusted him so much that they discussed the most secret matters in his presence. "Richard, you've become not just an advisor to me, but a true friend," Ott would say over family dinner. Without your analyses, I couldn't handle this difficult work. Sorge would smile gratefully, while inwardly horrified at how easily one could deceive a trusting person. Every word from Ott, every document he carelessly left on the table, every casual phrase over dinner, all of it was carefully memorized and transmitted to Moscow. By 1940, Sorge's network had become one of the most valuable sources of intelligence for the USSR. But the real test came in 1941, when he began hearing alarming rumors about massive German troop movements toward the Soviet border. In spring 1941, Sorge began carefully probing his German friends about what was happening in Europe. Officially, Germany and the USSR were allies, but tension could be felt in the air. Ott has been receiving urgent telegrams from Berlin frequently, Sorge told his radio operator Max Clausen during one of their clandestine meetings, and his mood has changed dramatically lately. Clausen, a German communist who had been working in Sorge's group for several years, nervously adjusted his glasses. Maybe we should be more careful. I've noticed someone watching my radio station. But Sorge was adamant. He sensed something important approaching and wasn't about to miss the opportunity to obtain critically important information. The decisive moment came on that May day when Ott, overwhelmed by emotions from the grandiosity of upcoming events, couldn't resist sharing with his best friend the Third Reich's greatest secret. Imagine, Richard, in a month we'll decide the fate of all Europe, the ambassador said excitedly, unfolding a map of the Eastern Front before Sorge. The Führer is confident the campaign will last no more than 3 months. By autumn, we'll be in Moscow. Sorge nodded sympathetically, asking clarifying questions and memorizing every detail. That same night, in his safe house, he transmitted to the center a detailed report about German attack plans. Germany will begin war against USSR on June 22nd. Main strike toward Moscow. Expect a complete campaign before winter. But Moscow didn't believe him. Stalin was convinced that Germany wouldn't dare fight on 2 fronts and viewed Sorge's reports as possible provocation. Maybe this journalist is working for the Germans, the Soviet leader suspiciously remarked to his aides. June 22, 1941, the Great Patriotic War began, completely confirming Sorge's accuracy. But now he faced an even more important task: determine whether Japan planned to attack the USSR from the east. The question of a second front became a matter of life and death for the Soviet Union. During summer 1941, when German forces were racing toward Moscow, every day of delay could cost millions of lives. Sorge intensified his work with Ozaki, who had access to secret government meetings. Ozaki-san, what is the government discussing? Will Japan help Germany? Sorge carefully inquired during one of their meetings in a traditional Japanese garden. Ozaki looked thoughtfully at the blooming sakura. Our generals are arguing. Some want to strike the Russians while they're weak. Others think we should deal with the Americans first. The decision will be made in September. This was information Sorge was willing to die for. He understood that his reports would determine the fate of millions of people and the outcome of humanity's most terrible war. Using all his connections, Ozaki managed to gain access to records of secret Imperial Council sessions where Japan's military strategy was discussed. By September, the picture became clear. Japanese leadership had decided not to attack the USSR, but instead to prepare for war with the United States in the Pacific. September 14, 1941, Sorge transmitted to Moscow a message that saved the Soviet Union. Japan will not attack USSR this year. All preparations are directed south, against USA and Britain. You can transfer troops from the Far East. This information allowed Stalin to transfer more than 30 divisions from the Far East to Moscow. The Siberian units, hardened in battles with the Japanese, played a decisive role in the battle for the capital and in the German army's first major defeat. But Sorge's success simultaneously brought his end closer. Intensive radio communications couldn't remain unnoticed by Japanese counterintelligence for long. Using radio direction finders, they gradually tightened the search ring. The first suspicions arose in summer. Police noticed that some illegal radio station was operating in a Tokyo district where many foreigners lived. Checks, searches, and interrogations began. October 10, 1941, Japanese secret police arrested artist Yuki Miyagi, one of the network's agents. Under torture, he couldn't hold out and named other names. October 15th, They arrested Ozaki. When he was brought into the interrogator's office, the Japanese journalist understood the game was over. "Ozaki-san, we know about your connections with communists," the interrogator said, laying out photographs and documents on the table. "Tell us about your contacts with foreign intelligence agents." Ozaki remained silent, but police already knew enough. The trail led to a German journalist who met too often with Japanese politicians and understood secrets too well. October 18, 1941, early in the morning, Japanese police surrounded Sorge's house. When they knocked on the door, he immediately understood it was the end. 8 years of living under a false identity had reached its finale. "Dr. Sorge, you are under arrest on suspicion of espionage," the police officer announced, entering the apartment. Sorge didn't resist. He calmly dressed, took his cigarettes and glasses. "I'm ready," he said with the dignity of a man who knew he had fulfilled his duty. In prison, Sorge behaved like a true professional. During interrogations, he confessed to espionage but didn't reveal a single secret that could harm Soviet intelligence. He presented his activities as serving communist ideals, not a specific state. "I worked for world revolution," he told investigators. "My goal was not to harm Japan, but to help workers around the world." The investigation lasted almost 2 years. The Japanese tried to uncover all details of the Soviet operation, but Sorge gave only information that was already compromised. September 7, 1943, the Tokyo court sentenced Richard Sorge and Hatsumi Ozaki to death by hanging. In death row, Sorge hoped the USSR would attempt to exchange him for Japanese prisoners of war. But Moscow remained silent. Stalin considered any negotiations about Sorge's fate too risky. "We cannot acknowledge that we have agents in Japan," he declared at a Politburo meeting. This would endanger other operations. November 7, 1944, on the 27th anniversary of the October Revolution, Richard Sorge was executed in Tokyo's Sugamo prison. His last words were, "Long live the Red Army! Long live the Soviet Union!" The terrible irony was that the man who saved Moscow and possibly the entire Soviet Union was abandoned by the very country he had faithfully served. Only in 1964, 20 years after his execution, was Sorge posthumously awarded the title Hero of the Soviet Union. The story of Dr. Richard Sorge shows that sometimes one person really can change the course of history. His information saved millions of lives and prevented defeat in humanity's most terrible war. But the price of this feat was terrifying, the life of a man who sacrificed everything for his beliefs. If this incredible story about the greatest spy of the 20th century captured your attention, subscribe to our channel to learn more amazing stories from the world of covert operations and intelligence. Hit the notification bell and write in the comments which spy story you'd like to hear next.